Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon from the East Coast of LA. Welcome to a 55th edition of Bitcoin Treasuries World, as I have branded the show to here. And today it's my pleasure and honor to have an old friend from this space, Guy Gomes, who's the CEO and founder of OranjeBTC, which is killing it in Brazil, in my own opinion. Before we even get started, I do want to preface with this with or share that I am an advisor for Guy at Orange BTC. I do love the company. I'm biased, but also I'm there because I like this story and I'm very bullish. And so far the numbers speak to that. But Guy, good to see you. Thanks for being here today. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Anders, good to see you. Thank you for having me, and congrats on 55 episodes. That's a big milestone right there.
Thank you. Yeah, it started as MicroStrategy Mondays, which
I know.
that was that was the only company worth covering. I started in October. Started one day before True North started actually, but then they've done like Jeff had done Quant Bros with Ryan, of course, for some time. But then this year I started covering other companies because I started to see them as interesting from investor point of view, which I also think that Orange is. But we're going to talk about Orange. We're going to talk the general space. We're going to talk Bitcoin today. What do you want to share straight off the bat, or what's like we have a history, Guy. We go back a few years actually.
Yep. So maybe start there. Maybe I introduce
Sure.
myself a little bit for those who haven't met me yet. So I'm Gui, Brazilian, born and raised. Spent most of my life in Brazil. Uh, like I was an entrepreneur back home. Was running my company, but in 2016 was time to move abroad. I really wanted to get closer to finance and technology. So I moved to LA, very close to you, to go to UCLA Anderson for my MBA. That's when I met Bitcoin. So when you have some extra time on your hands during school, that's when I met Bitcoin for the first time. And my whole plan coming to the US was to get closer to finance, technology, entrepreneurship, and go back home and bring a new company, a new concept, a new idea to that local market that I know well. And eventually it took me 10 years to do so because out of business school, I joined Bridgewater Associates. For those who don't know, it is a hedge fund started by Ray Dalio. He became quite popular in the past few years, but Ray has been a macro thinker. He has done extremely well managing money for himself and others. And I joined the company to help on Ray's transition. Ray was living day to day as CEO, CIO, founder, main name within the firm. He was moving to the board, and there was kind of an internal strategy group helping him on that journey. I joined that crew and worked on that project for about 1 year. And then I moved roles within the company to help Bridgewater to distribute their investment strategies around the globe. So there was kind of a growth unit within Bridgewater under the new leadership. And I spent about 3 years of my life helping large institutions around the globe to understand their investment strategies and allocate to Bridgewater return streams. But while working at Bridgewater, my level of conviction in Bitcoin grew to, I wouldn't say all-time high because it kept growing from there, but the level of conviction was pretty high. And I really wanted to join the movement to help with adoption. So I left Bridgewater, joined Swan Bitcoin. That's when we met. So moved to LA.
What year was that? What year did you? Because I'm
That
just gonna like
was early 2022, a
early
little bit
2022.
before Terra Luna and blew up and
Yeah.
everything that happened in that year.
So I'm gonna, since I didn't have like, a prestigious actual full-time role, instead I'll pull the card of seniority because that was around the time I think that I left active work for Swan after about 3 years because I was one of the first three advisors in Swan from half a year before GiveBitcoin.io, which I started helping Corey with, became Swan. So I was there from 19 October or September, and it was not until March 20 that it became Swan.com. So then I think I stopped helping out on the online marketing, which is my background, about the time that you came in. But we still we still had some dealings with each other. We had some, we had some, we had some like negotiations and stuff.
Yep, and we did some events together
Yep,
and all of
yep.
that. So then I worked at Swan for about 2 years and a half, and left mid of last year during the summer of 2024, and started working kind of right away on what eventually became Orange. Right when I left, I was following this space very closely. I was an investor in MicroStrategy since early days, kind of 2020, early 2021, when Michael began his Bitcoin journey. And I was still working at Bridgewater, had a 401k account, really wanted to get exposure into Bitcoin. There's no way for you to buy Bitcoin, or there was no Bitcoin ETFs at the time. So when Saylor bought, that was essentially the only way within that 401k account that I had to get exposure to Bitcoin. And that's when I invested for the first time and began following his trajectory. And then essentially late 2024, October, November, that's when he came up with the concept of a Bitcoin treasury company. That's when he placed that large convert that Allianz took a big size of it. And I think that's when many players were following his steps and say, hey, you know what? And that's when Meta Planet in Japan was getting close to maybe 800 coins or so, 1,000 coins. And I think that's when the industry and many came up with their own concepts and their own approaches to this new concept.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? This industry is still so incredibly new. Like really, even beginning of this year, there was kind of only MicroStrategy, aka now strategy, and it's at least for U.S. investors. There weren't really any other interesting, attractive investment propositions, and I do want to say so. Sometimes people come up to me and go like, hey, I want a job in the Bitcoin industry, like how do I get a job? And I would say like start like givers gain, people that put effort and time into trying to help others. That usually comes back to you one way or another if you show that you got some skills, you have some resourcefulness, entrepreneurship. The gig with Swan, I only landed that because I had started a Bitcoin meetup in LA, which now has more than 1,000 members. And I was very active and that was 2017. And Corey saw that on LinkedIn combined with the online advertising experience that he wanted in-house as well, or at least on advisor level. And the same with MicroStrategy Mondays. I started that last year out of passion for the treasury, Bitcoin treasury space, because the companies that you represent in strategy and Meta Planet, SWC, can outperform Bitcoin by using financial tools and challenges in the legacy system, trap capital to increase the Bitcoin per share. And that's what you're doing with Orange. And so I was doing this show, and you had seen me doing that, and that's why you reached out in January, asked if if I was interested in potentially helping out with Orange, right?
That's spot on. And just echoing a little bit what you mentioned, I agree with you. The best way to land a job in this industry is by doing, right? And you have so many examples of so many people. And like, let's be honest, like a lot of Bitcoin runs on Twitter, right? So doing something could be as easy as start to produce high quality content on Twitter that essentially costs you nothing. And if you're doing good work, someone will take notice, and that's a good way to get into the space. And we've seen so many names, including this treasury movement of people who are producing content, being smart, generating education, and eventually joining the industry full time.
Right. Like Joe Bonnet, Punter Jeff, Ben Workman. People, some of these only kind of just blew up last year when the interest for the space came along, and their high quality of content brought quickly a lot of followers and attention, and people and working in the industries, running these companies like yourself, took notice, and that's how people have landed a job.
Yeah,
But
but if you go even before that, because this treasury wave is kind of new, there are a lot of people. Sam Callahan, who works with us as an example, he began his journey within this industry by producing high quality analytical content about Bitcoin, and eventually he joined Swan, and then he went on to other firms, and eventually is now working with Orange. So it's just, there are many, many, many examples of people building their careers within these industries by doing. And it's a little bit of the core concept of Bitcoin. It's fully organic, right? There's no CEO, there's no chief marketing officer, there's no executive team. Bitcoin is fully organic, and people are doing things and finding themselves a job.
yeah. So I'm just thinking. Obviously, I'm watching Orange a lot. Just a public service announcement to everyone watching on Twitter or X. For some reason, I'm not getting any chats you do. I don't get them fed in here. I only get from YouTube. One example here. That's my friend Movement Guy. He's saying "Sup, homie." And so if you want to participate, if you want to ask key questions, unfortunately, I'm sorry, you have to go to YouTube to watch it live, and then I can pull it up on the screen. But the as someone who have an interest in this space, then no, let me. I want to go back to the like when you reached out in January. So we hadn't been so much in contact, so I didn't even know that you had stopped at Swan, and you were my point of contact with the events, the Bitcoin prep parties I did that Swan sponsored, and we spoke together. And so I thought, Guy, he's like, you reached out saying you have a role, and I thought, oh, you want me to like start arranging corporate events or something? I'm not super interested in that, but you should always, if somebody approach you that hear what they have to say, and then you describe what to me is like a dream role to get to have conversations with you and Giga about what you guys are doing and help spread the word, which is something that I'm doing just out of love and passion because I think it's so exciting. So that was awesome. But I'm following this space, and I'm very much focused on what can you guys, these companies, produce of yield, like here and now, because I think that's the best way to take the finger, have the finger on the pulse and see, well, there's some companies, big announcement, big purchases, but the yield is, there's not so much yield because they're already big. Strategy will likely forever be the biggest. Metaplan is likely going to be number two, if not one. But as an investor, I'm interested in the yield because the yield drives the shareholder price. And Orange has produced just this quarter, you came public October 7th, has produced a 2.23% yield, which is more than I have seen others do. Granted, you launched this quarter, next quarter, want to see the same, of course, but SWC is there as well. So it's two of the smaller treasury companies, you followed by SWC, both less than 4,000 Bitcoin, that is leading the yield charge, so to speak, in Q4. So what's your thoughts on how you're doing with the yield right now? Despite the sentiment, you're still yielding, even though MNAV is right around run. It's swinging right above and below. What's your thoughts about that, and how are you going to continue?
Yeah, so a few thoughts. First, stepping back, this, what you just mentioned, is an important concept of this industry because size matters, right? If you only have 50, 100, 500 BTC, although that's an amazing strategy and everyone should do it, and as any individual investor, you and I know that like getting to 1 BTC is a massive milestone. If you manage to get to 10, is life changing. If you get to 100 BTC, it's probably generational wealth for you and next generations. But for a company, right, if you don't have a meaningful enough size, usually blocks you a little bit of your ability to take leverage and to be more active and more creative. So being too small is likely not ideal. You want to be as big as possible. And of course, as you mentioned, strategy and what Sailor has done is unbelievable. But at the same time, when you get to that level of sizing, it's pretty hard for you to generate a meaningful yield. And even this last quarter, actually, they have reduced their Bitcoin exposure per share after doing that cash buffer.
Yeah.
So, all of that said, I really like where we are because we are large enough to matter, especially in a region that is not the US, right? We're talking about a capital market that is much smaller than the United States. So our balance sheet, especially overall, is pretty big. I think we're around number 26 around the globe right now. So it is a good spot to be. We have 3,720 coins. But especially when you think about the local market, we are listed on the Brazilian stock exchange. That's a very meaningful balance sheet for one to have. We're already one of the largest companies in that market, right?
You're one of the largest companies in terms of balance sheet in all of Brazil. Like,
Yes.
that's wild. I
It
mean,
is.
it's a lot of Bitcoin.
It is. It's meaningful. And then again, and Bitcoin is now sitting at what, $92,000. We're not even close to the $1 million that we'll eventually get to. So we'll eventually be likely one of the largest companies in the region, right? And Latin America is a big region. So all of that to say that having any amount of Bitcoin is the right strategy, but if you're too small, it's likely harder for you to be more creative and issue prefers or other types of that and all that stuff. And if you get too big, the yield goes down by nature.
Yeah.
So what have we been doing since we launched? So essentially, for almost every single week since we launched about a month ago, we bought Bitcoin, right? And the market is a much more challenging market, as you know. Bitcoin has gone from 126 all the way down to $80,000. Is now around 90K. The sentiment is not as positive as before. Actually, it's quite negative. So overall, it's a much more challenging environment. But we keep at the ball. Like, doesn't matter the sizing of our purchase. Like, trying to buy a little bit every single week matters, and it shows consistency. And that's what we've done. We essentially bought Bitcoin almost every single week. And when we're trading below MNAV, given that we had capital to buy Bitcoin that week, and in that week per se was better to buy back shares than buying Bitcoin, the discount to NAV was not that meaningful. But anyway, you're buying Bitcoin at discounted prices because MNAV was around 95, 96. So then in 2 weeks, instead of buying Bitcoin, we bought back shares. And by doing that in a consistent way, it adds up, right? And then how are we funding those acquisitions?
Yes,
Go
so
ahead.
to be fair, did when you went IPO 7th of October, you were lucky to have chosen, it's not necessarily luck, of course, it's choices, so that's nothing to do with luck, but you chose to have dollar reserves as well for the company. You already, I know, were thinking about, well, it's good to have some cash in hand. Obviously most in Bitcoin, but that has, I presume, is what has allowed you to yield even when the MNAV is below one. And at the same time, it has given a safety net under the share price where if it gets too far from one in a negative direction, like below, you're just buying share. So you kind of, oh,
Yeah,
what's your thoughts?
that
Let's hear
that
your
that
words.
was essentially it. It was by choice, right? We had a cash buffer. One, because of course the company has operating costs, and when I have like a runway of years, not months, so you have everything that you need. We run extremely lean, but like you need to have a cash buffer for that. Second, these operations, we were very effective on our transaction costs and all of that, especially when compared to other US peers. But we managed to spend less than what we had anticipated, which meant that we had some surplus of cash, and we turned that into Bitcoin, of course. But you're right, we had some cash buffer that we used to buy Bitcoin, but also what we have is shares in treasury, right? So the company has shares in treasury, and we have sold those shares in a few of those weeks into the market to capitalize the business and buy more Bitcoin, right?
Hmm.
So by being able to sell shares into the market and capitalize the company to buy Bitcoin, and also using some of the cash at hand, we're able to essentially in every single week uh, increase the amount of Bitcoin per share for all the shareholders.
And just to make it clear to everyone, the shares you have in the treasury is essentially shares of Orange that Orange owns itself and has the ability to sell into the market when there's a premium. So, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So uh, uh, in Brazil, you can issue shares and you can do shares buyback. When you do shares buyback, you have shares in treasury that you can cancel or sell. In that case, we do have shares in treasury. And if we're trading above MNAV, our main goal, our main KPI as a firm is to increase the amount of Bitcoin per share. So in those occasions, we can sell shares into the market, capitalize the business, and buy Bitcoin. So go
And
ahead.
do you have ample shares going forward when its sentiment comes back, which I believe, and let's say MNAV goes, solidly above 1.5 to maybe even 3 and stays there for a long time. Do you have an amount of shares of Orange in the treasury that you can continue to sell them into the market at a premium to net
Yeah,
asset
this
value for
is
some time, or
this is public information. We have about
okay,
13 million shares in treasury of common shares, and we also have an option.
13 million?
Yes,
And right now, there is assumed diluted shares outstanding 162 million.
yes,
Okay, so about 10% of the existing.
yep.
Okay,
And we have an option to buy more shares into the future. So I think we're very the setup is pretty good from that perspective. We have shares and we'll be able to sell them into the market if there's an opportunity to do so. And also, as any other public company, you can do follow-ons, you can do new share issuance. Of course, is a little bit less flexible because you have to go through all the regulatory process and approve with the local regulators, but there are those options as well.
gotcha. So I do want to bring up. So I do these posts on X on a regular basis because it is it is I think okay, I put this on screen. So I put out these tweets on a regular basis. I think this is what we spoke about. I look at the companies that I have strong belief in, the only ones that I am considering investing in myself. Some of them I have shares in, some of them I don't. Most of them I do, I guess. Uh, then I I like once a week or every second week when any of you have new numbers, I make an update. So if anyone follows me on X, they'll get this comparison. And this is where Orange consistently has been performing the best, followed by SWC in England, a company I'm also a big fan of. But then when the reason I'll bring this up also is because I just wanted to highlight Metaplanet and Strategy. They are actually negative yield, and the reason they're negative yield, and I don't need to share the screen anymore now, I have shown it. The reason they have negative yield, and Metaplanet being minus 0.1% and Strategy being minus 1%, is because they have strengthened their balance sheets with USD. So it's not like something is wrong there. They've done some moves that I consider being quite smart. Obviously, they're smarter than me anyway, so they know what they're doing. But what I want to get to is some people are saying, well, like these numbers you're looking at, the current yield is not so interesting. It's about, do the company have preferred shares or not? Because without the preferred shares, they're not going to be able to do much in this climate around one, even though both you and SWC have shown you actually are able to do pretty well around this sentiment. But it also kind of highlights that even though Strategy is selling a lot of preferred shares almost every week, they're still just balancing around zero for the quarter. That's the thing with having a large amount of Bitcoin. They're probably going to be the biggest company in the world ever. Sailor Bill will be the richest man ever. But as an investor, I do want to get a return. I don't have enough. I need to increase my wealth. So I'm looking for that return. I'm looking for that yield. And I think they will both do very well. But you have preferred to create a yield, and I think they will do very well, both of those big ones next year. But that also brings me to Guy.
And I have a question for you as well, Anders, on that topic.
Why don't you shoot it to me now, and then we'll go back to, like, I have a question.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and I feel the industry will evolve on that front, on what is the right methodology to calculate Bitcoin per share when issuing the preferreds, right?
Yeah, it's that is such a good question, and probably one that is something that I'm still battling with. So it's another way of saying that it's above my pay grade. I'd go to a CEO like yourself, Guy, to get the answer. But it's true that when you look at Strategy, and they will be selling a lot of Strike preferreds as well. I think it's already above 1 billion. And and when you're calculating the sats per share, you're never calculating the preferreds that are in Strike or what they can convert to, because no one will ever convert them. They will be doing something that would be negative for them financially. So no one will ever convert their Strike to MSTR common stock, because being Strike, they are above in the capital structure in case of some scenario where the company has to be liquidated, which I think is very unlikely. So you don't want to convert because you're above in the capital structure and you have a yield. You're never going to convert, but they're still there. They're going to be there forever. So how do you count that?
That's it, because you have to pay the dividends. Even like one thing is Strike that, of course, has that conversion option, but even the other ones, right?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have to pay back the dividends. And what is the best way for you to? I don't think the industry is there yet, but I do think over the coming quarters and years, probably more detailed methodologies will be applied, because right now is a simplistic way of saying all the coins that I bought with the issuance of the preferreds, all of those coins are for the common shareholders, which on one way makes sense, but then you're totally disconsidering that you have to pay the dividends of the preferreds and they'll be there perpetually. So some of those coins will have to be used to pay that cash flow. So interesting concepts here.
Well, so yeah, it is, and I don't know if that was your answer, your own answer to the question, but otherwise, I want to hear that as well. But I guess you're kind of debating it, just like I am. I would say this works perfectly, and there is an argument for not counting them having ownership of the Bitcoin as long as Bitcoin has a CAGR, 4 or 5 year CAGR above the dividend, right?
Yep.
Once that is not the case, if it ever becomes like not the case, then you have a different problem on your hands.
Yep. So again, that's a different discussion, quite technical, and I do believe the industry evolve on how to approach and calculate. But interesting, like those metrics uh, deserve some kind of thoughtful analysis to actually understand the different ways of getting to those numbers.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry, and
It's
I just
interesting.
go off track here.
No. I love it. I think you're the first I have interviewed that have asked me a question. I love it. I love talking about this. So it's perfect. I don't need preparations for questions. I love shooting from the hip. That's why these are rarely, if ever, super structured. You didn't receive questions beforehand. I very much enjoy like organic conversation and see where it goes. I think often you get some good results out of that. I wanna also take a look at replace screen share. I want to have a look at your dashboard, I think, and also I do want to just say I am a fan, and we've spoken about this since the spring. I'm a fan of you having chosen to do the proof of reserves as MetaPlanet are doing. I think SWC and H100 are thinking about it. You have now
Or
proven.
anyone I think is doing as well, right? Jack has
Okay, yeah,
published.
yeah.
I think we
Well,
have
I'd
three
love to.
companies so far in the space doing it. It's us,
Right.
21, and MetaPlanet.
And I like that. As an investor, I like that you could see that you safely can prove that you have the Bitcoin. I think that's a positive. Transparency is good, and it's a proof of reserves. That's positive. So that's a great thing. I do also really like the dashboard that you guys have built. And if we're just taking a look at it here, you can go to US dollar for the price. It's $2.06. You can see the BTC holdings. I mean, there's a lot of things here, obviously, that are similar to other treasury companies. Share price compared to enterprise value. And right now, Guy, the MNAV actually is 1. I think it was 0.99 when we started this stream. And then right there is so I'm keeping an eye on the assumed diluted shares outstanding, because I know when you are below um, below 1 that you're buying up shares and taking them off the market. Is there anything you want to highlight here or
I think
comment
if you're
on?
going to improve reserves, well, I
Yeah.
think this, like, just a second, this chart top right is a cool one. If you could just go back
I'll go back.
and
Yeah, I'll
refresh
go
back.
back. Let me go back. Boom. Yeah, the BTC holdings.
Yeah, it just shows like what we're saying about constantly be buying and increasing the Bitcoin holdings. And if you go to proof of reserves, that you can on the top,
Yep, sure. Yep.
they're
I'll go.
going. And just to make a comment, we have all the address there. You can go
Here's
to
the addresses. Yep.
Yep, can go straight to main pool. You can go to Bitcoin Treasuries.net as well if you want to see like a third party independent platform. So
Yep. I just clicked on one of them, but then it took me to that tab, but screen share didn't switch
fine.
over. But just
Anyone can
people
do
know
it.
they're there. They can go and have a look at it. It's Orange BTC. It's Orange with a J, and then it's BTC, and then .com, right?
Yep, that's it. That's the website. Like one last thing. Okay, you put it down, but
Oh,
just to
I can put it back on.
if you go to about,
Okay, let me go to about. Boom, boom,
sorry, not
boom.
about. If you go to, can you
That's
go
a
to
beautiful.
OrangeBTC? Just go to home. Let's just go to.
Okay, that is a beautiful picture though. There, there you
Yep.
go.
If you scroll down, of course, you have the basic data here. You have the
Uh-huh.
proof reserves, the dashboard. But if you go all the way down,
Proof of reserve. So on the homepage, ladies and gentlemen, you can click to proof of reserves, and you can click to the Treasury dashboard. Your futures build. I think you have some great pictures from back in the 70s or 80s or something here, 60s
yep,
maybe.
that's all
Um,
AI generated, by the way. Uh,
I love like AI. Wow,
but that's what I
I'm
wanted to
really using it.
highlight. There
Okay,
is a little bit of our vision for the future. It's kind of a manifesto. We don't need to go there. It's more of a statement as a company. But we have two articles written by Sam Callahan. One is a primer on Bitcoin treasury companies. He did a
right.
pretty good job for anyone who follows this space and likes this topic. It's a very thoughtful piece from him in Portuguese and English. You can download the paper there. And we also have,
And I was going to ask you for this if people want to stay on top of what's going on in Orange.
you can
Uh,
just,
there's an
yeah,
email they can sign up for their
you can
newsletter.
sign up
Yeah,
for the email or follow us on social media as well. Then, of course, I don't think anyone in this call needs a one-on-one on Bitcoin, but a lot of people in Brazil do. So Sam also wrote The Invention of Digital Scarcity, which is a paper on Bitcoin and its creation and its value proposition. So it's a pretty good one. You can download in English and Portuguese. And that goes along with, as you know, we have a very meaningful educational arm.
yeah.
We have two main pillars of the business right now. One's the treasury. We talked a little bit about that. The goal of increasing the amount of Bitcoin per share, growing our Bitcoin treasury. And we already are the largest Bitcoin holder in Latin America, and we want to preserve that and expand that position. So that's one of the main goals as a company, but also Brazil and Latin America overall, in terms of adoption and full understanding of Bitcoin, is behind the US. So we also built an educational arm, which we're going to be producing content, putting a lot of content online, which helps to drive adoption, helps to drive the model, and get more folks into Bitcoin.
So just like Sailor actually is doing a big educational effort in English, primarily on other people's platforms than Strategy's own, you are just like Swan has a very strong educational background where Sam has put a lot of content out, Brady and John Har is it's a similar thing, and what you're saying is that for Orange, that is actually the operational arm of the company. Is that correct?
It is the operational arm of the company as of today, and we have put a large event in Brazil for institutional investors. The first event for institutional investors about Bitcoin. Can you believe it? Bitcoin has 17 years of age, and there has never been in Brazil an event totally dedicated to Bitcoin for an institutional audience. So we did our first last month, very well attended, pretty good way to spread the word. And then we're going to be doing a lot of online content and in-person events. We're doing partnerships with a lot of local schools and other educational programs to spread the word and help people to understand Bitcoin. Because as I like to say, if you think Bitcoin is good for the US, Bitcoin is great for Latin America. Like this is a region that has seen hyperinflation, currency debasement, capital control in the past, and Bitcoin, in my view, is a solution to change the trajectory of such a beautiful and rich region.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question because I know most Metaplanet investors are very excited about the 0% yield that there is in Japan. I believe the yield, the interest rate is high in Brazil, but it's all about the real yield, the real interest rate compared to inflation of the money supply. And without knowing the numbers, and you can answer this, I'm guessing that the value of the currency in Brazil is they're losing value faster than in Japan. Yes or no? Because
Yeah, that's again global markets. The US runs the show,
yeah.
right? And then when you look at Brazil as an example, your nominal rate, the government pays you right now around 15%, 1.5. Official inflation is not as high right now, has been quite high in years back, but right now is about, let's call 5 to 7%. So one would argue, okay, so real rates is anywhere between 7 and 8%, which on one way is correct. On the other hand, you have to take in consideration uh, FX, right? And just as an example, when I moved to the US about 10 years ago, I was able to buy $1 with about 3.2 BRL.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the same dollar, which we all know buys you fewer goods 10 years later in the US, but the same dollar now costs you about 5.4 BRL and has been as high as 6.3 a few months back. So the
Yeah.
currency debasement, like the loss of global purchasing power for Brazilians was quite robust over the past 10 years. And of course, Bitcoin solves for that, right? If you compare what happened with the BRL against the Bitcoin, local returns over the past 5, 6 years is 75% in the local rate currency. So it's a meaningful return.
So, and that, all right, that's interesting. Obviously, that's why we're talking about it. But that also leads to the exciting topic of, okay, so I know from SWC, Andrew has said it here on this channel that they do, I think they want to be meaningfully bigger than they are now before the cost of launching prefers make sense in UK. What is the situation for Orange and Brazil in terms of? I presume it's very much a matter of what are the costs associated? Will it make sense? Do you expect a demand? Well, I mean, it's an attractive product. So, what is the situation for Orange? Because personally, I like that this smaller size has given a yield despite the negative sentiment. I love to see that as a shareholder that the shares in like are backed by more and more value, even in a sentiment like this where we're below MNAV half the time. You're buying shares, then we're above. You sell shares. I don't know how long you need to be from one to make these moves. If you have something, if you can comment on that, how low do you want to be if you're allowed to before you want to buy shares? How high do you want it to be before you're selling shares? And also, what is your thoughts on prefs and Orange's ability to launch those in Brazil? Because if you can do it from this size, I like the upside from here, if you know what I mean.
So yeah, let's go just like a step back. Right now, we have a very modest, from my perspective, leverage ratio, right? We have issued debt. It's not that we have only equity. We do have a debt instrument. Actually, we issued the first ever uh, convertible note at zero coupon, 5 years maturity in the history of the country. I just told you that the government pays you 15% to borrow your money, and us as a brand new company operating in the Bitcoin ecosystem, we're able to issue that at zero coupon. So that's interesting. It converts, of course. There's a strike that allows for conversion to the future. We like that instrument for a few reasons. Because one, 5 years, no coupon, first in the history of the country, and we're a brand new company, right? We
In
don't
this
have.
risky industry of Bitcoin, and you're borrowing the Brazilian real at nothing for 5 years. I like where this is going.
And the beauty from that mechanism, from our perspective, one of them is there's no cash considerations, right? You don't have to pay dividends on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, which as a company that is brand new, that will build revenue, that is getting off the ground, you want to be thoughtful about that, right? So, but all that to say that right now our debt ratio is about 6%. So overall, from my perspective, and we've been open about this, like there's room to take more leverage, right? And doing that in a smart way. And then again, I need to be thoughtful about not giving guidance as a public company, but we are exploring and we're going to analyze different ways of doing so, right? We just got off the ground. We have our shares trading. We began with a very small investor base. That investor base is growing week after week, day after day. Actually, is a pretty meaningful growth that we've seen. So the appetite for digital equity is there, right?
Right, right.
Brazilian investors are looking for this, which is very good to see and was the base of the model and is playing out as expected. And we do believe Brazilians also want to have digital credit, right? And there will be different ways of doing so. And of course, preferreds are one of the approaches that are going to look into it.
And the cost of doing that, do you need to grow to 10,000 Bitcoin before that's something you could pull the trigger on? Or is it something that is possible from this level?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Again, we need to be mindful about the difference between the US market and a market like Brazil, right? A 350, $400 million company in the US listed is not a big deal. Like it's a meaningful company. Don't get me wrong. Like you build a business of like 350, $400 million in the US. That's a meaningful business, especially if most of it is all Bitcoin, right? So that would be a massive company. But we know US markets, right? For you to get a banker to work with you, you better have 10 to 20 million dollars plus the legal fees and all that stuff. So the cost of doing business in the US is high, which goes back to what some folks say, hey, if you don't have 10,000 coins, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, right? And if you're not raising anywhere between 100 and 200 million dollars or more to a debt instrument or something like that, probably doesn't make much sense for you to spend 5 to 10 million dollars with legal fees, banker fees, and all that stuff. Brazil is a totally different market, right? It's much, 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 much more affordable for you to issue these instruments when the time is right. And then second, $400 million company in Brazil, we're talking about a company that is about 1.8 or so billion BRL. That's a meaningful company. So of course you want to be thoughtful about transaction costs, but I don't think that is an imperative for us, given the local cost structure and the cost of doing business locally.
So what I'm reading between the lines is that you could now, it could make sense, it might make sense, you're looking at all possibilities to launch prefs next year. It is not cost prohibitive to do so in Brazil. So that's something you're
From
looking
a
at.
transaction cost, no. But
Yeah,
there are other considerations. What about the cash
yeah,
flow? How do you think about that? So,
yeah,
and is
for
the
sure.
market ready for that, or the market might not be ready yet? Uh,
And also, that leads us to talk about the 4 year cycle. Because if you believe that Bitcoin is going to go to, very low next year. It's traditional, the cycle's intact, blah, blah. Then you may not want to take on a lot of debt right now and then have your collateral drop being cut in half or so. So that's one thing I want to hear your thoughts on, but I also want to hear your thoughts on because right now there's relatively little investor interest in US for Orange because no one can buy it, right? Everyone was struggling to get their hands on Meta, Planet, SWC, H100. They had to register over the counter, I believe is what you would say, have an investable product that I, as American resident, can invest in. That's not, there's none such thing for Orange right now. So there's two questions in there. You can take them as you wish.
So talking about the cycles, my honest perspective is that they don't matter that much any longer, right? There's even an argument to be made whether or not this year was a bull market or a bear market, right?
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
argue both ends of that discussion, but like one good example is we're essentially flat for the year, right?
Yeah.
When gold and the S&P hit all-time highs and kept there, and we have seen a tsunami of positive news for this market, right? And it's not during the year, like only last month alone, from Harvard disclosing a massive investment from like Vanguard and Schwab and other banks and other financial platforms embracing Bitcoin, a lot of new regulation being much more open and taking the asset as collateral. JP Morgan, who was an active Nair, like he was always against it, now is offering Bitcoin backed loans. So we had a wave of positive news and the price barely moved. So overall, I do believe this concept of cycles are kind of gone or they're not as relevant as before. I think the trajectory is intact, right? This asset is more needed now than has ever been. There's even a name for the trade, right? The debasement trade is funny. Like Bitcoiners have been playing that hand for decades, and now there is a fancy name all over the place. So, from that perspective, I think the setup is quite positive for next year. Of course, impossible for you to get the price right. I'm positive that if you were to ask any Bitcoiner on January 1st, say, hey, all of these events will happen in the coming 12 months. Where would we be price wise? Like the lowest bet would probably be 150, 160, something like that. So it's not
And
playing out.
those people were ridiculed because they were too bearish, like strategic Bitcoin reserve. The list goes on. It's like, there's no way we're not reaching 200,000 minimum this year,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. But like that's what is interesting about Bitcoin, right? It always goes kind of on the opposite direction and surprise you. And when you think, okay, there's nothing positive to come to this market, suddenly there's a massive positive news and things really move. And when you think the setup is ideal and you're going to explode in price, it goes a full year with a bunch of positive developments, and we kind of went sideways. So all of that to say that we continue on our journey to accumulate Bitcoin in an intelligent way, right? Again, talking a little bit about how we're here, like we have a low debt ratio by design, right? We pass on a bunch of different opportunities and term sheets, and we could have levered up way higher from the start, and that will put us in a much more delicate situation right now because Bitcoin is at a lower price. That's when you want to be taking some leverage to buy more Bitcoin. So what I mean is, I think as a company, we want to be buying Bitcoin in a consistent way, in a coherent way. And the price action is the price action. Trying to time the market is extremely hard, but you have to be very wise doing so. I really like our position of having some leverage to show it's possible to have higher convexity, but also room to increase the amount of leverage and buy more Bitcoin at these prices. And if Bitcoin is going down, having some extra room is good. You can do another issuance if possible. Or if Bitcoin is going higher, you already have some leverage and the convexity is in place. So we're going to continue to push forward on that end.
May I just add that on your dashboard, it shows the zero coupon, first ever zero coupon in Brazil, in a currency that is losing value over time faster than US dollars. You've been able to borrow at zero this convertible bond, and that is right now on the dashboard showing to be 6.65% of compared to your assets of the company. So that's the leverage that is on there right now, which really isn't a lot. And that's interesting if that's something you want to build higher to have more leverage to the upside. If you're waiting to have the 4-year cycle broken confirmed by a new all-time high, I think technically, if Bitcoin hits 130,000 next year, that technically shows officially the 4-year cycle is gone. That's my
down this year, right?
Sorry?
Or if we are down for the year.
Or if this year's down, yeah. If we're down for the year, it's also gone to the downside. Wonderful. So for the American investors, let's get to that part of the question.
Yeah, I'll get to that. So for American investors, right now it's possible, but not that easy to invest. You have to have an account in Brazil. Of course, we're looking into the ADR model. That's what MetaPlanet and Smarter Web and other companies have done. There's a cost component, which is not that meaningful, but of course you have to look into it. But I think for us, the main consideration is getting the timing right? As you know, the sentiment is quite low right now. There's even a crowded space in the US with many players. When would be the ideal time to do something like that? That's a consideration. I don't have the answer on timing, but we're working and exploring the path as well.
Yeah, and I want to just so that makes sense. And right now, with the sentiment, there probably wouldn't be a lot of buyers of Orange stock in US. Once the sentiment back, the story is different. I will though say that yes, the US Treasury equity market is crowded, but they're all kind of competing in the same market for when it comes to like prefs, where we see US-based investors like myself happily investing in someone that has a local monopoly-like situation. Like MetaPlanet is a super interesting story. I think SWC and Orange as an investor, because you can do something locally like MetaPlanet can do with yen prefs coming out. That strategy can't compete with for the next 1.5 years or so. I think maybe 1 year. But I just want to, if anyone is interested in just following Orange and staying on top of what's going on, then I have created this as a being associated with Orange and being excited about it. I created this X community, OranjeBTC investors. Well, if you click on that, you come to a community page, just like there's a community for all the others. It's still very small. It's because it's very much right now a Portuguese local experience. But again, I think to me, as an looking at it, is makes it even more so exciting about the upside being a very much a local situation, just like MetaPlanet has in Japan. But instead of having 31,000, you are launching stuff potentially from a base of 3,700 Bitcoin.
So and let me tap on that because just sorry to cut you off, but I think like just
that's perfect
to the local presence. Like right now in the US, if you want to have exposure through the public markets to Bitcoin, or if you may, the digital assets industry as a whole, right? And I'm not even talking about the ETFs, but you probably have something around 40 to 50 options, right? Because you have from MicroStrategy and all the other now 21 Stripe. There is Pump's version, Adam Back, Trump. They're at least only on the Bitcoin only space. There's probably 5 or 6 of them, plus ADRs from international players in the US, like MetaPlanet, plus all the other tokens, whatever it is, from Pump Coin, from Trump Coin to Doge, Treasuries. So there's a bunch of nonsense stuff there. Then you have from Coinbase to Bakkt to all the infrastructure players. There's
Miners.
now we have all the miners. So there's probably 40 plus options for one to build exposure to Bitcoin or digital assets through public markets in the US. In Latin America, there's zero.
Yeah.
There's no miner, there's no infrastructure player, there's no pure play treasury company, there's nothing like that. So it's not that the treasury space is not crowded. It's much more like there's very few opportunities for local investors who have to invest through capital markets to get exposure to this new industry. And it's the same for international investors. So if you're a big institutional investor and you have a LATAM or an emerging markets bucket, and you have to invest in public companies in emerging markets, and you're trying to diversify EM risk, right? Within that sliver of your portfolio, trying to diversify emerging markets risk. And a good way to diversify emerging market risk is tapping into a market like Bitcoin. So it's pretty interesting what eventually will play out as we build in the region and the types of investors that we eventually will be able to have exposure to not only Bitcoin, but an emerging market like Brazil.
Absolutely. Another question, and this one might hit hard, Guy, is I'm going to throw you a tough question out. Look, Orange, I'm an Orange advisor, right? I'm associated to some extent here. And here I'm sitting with, look, I love my Italian silk t-shirt and everything, but why don't I have Orange merch?
That's on us. I will give you some like this one. Again, going back to the basics, we are smart on costs, and this is a silly way to save money, by the way, but we produce all of our t-shirts in Brazil, which costs 1/4 of the price and is same high quality, if not better. So I'll be back in Brazil in a few weeks, and I'll bring a bag full of t-shirts, and you're gonna be the first one.
Awesome. And then I can rock it, when I interview you or when I do other shows. And so for that same reason, the SWC is sending me stuff. It's like crossing the Atlantic, I think, as we speak, because I'm interviewing Andrew and Jesse wearing Strategy or MetaPlanet caps, right? It's not cool, but I'm just pushing you guys to, send me merch.
It's all over Brazil, but it's coming to the US as well, and you're going to be the first one to get it.
Awesome. I love it. Do you guys do caps? Otherwise, I will do my own caps.
We'll do caps as well.
Caps, yeah. Hoodies.
Yep.
Awesome. Looking forward to see what you got. I think, me personally, I see, as you explained, right now you're literally, well, you're not the only treasury company. Milieu is, and there's some others, I think, maybe there. You're in a very good position, no doubt. You're by far the biggest, and you're yielding actively, even in this sentiment. I do see Orange becoming a big player in Brazil. I mean, you already are, but as Brazilians learn about Bitcoin, the upside is great. And what I know we probably have gone past your time, so we can end it here maybe. But
we can do another question or so.
Let this be the last question. What I'm also excited about as with Orange is that you told me that, which I don't, no one outside understands this, but if you're Argentinian Colombian, Chilean, then when you open a broker account in these countries, I think maybe to some extent even in Mexico, I did some AI on this, then automatically you have access to buying stocks on B3, which is the stock exchange in Brazil that you are listed on. Can you explain to which extent this actually you're actually a target an equity that is targeting the entire global South Latin market?
Yeah.
Which extent is that?
So the largest capital market in Latin America is B3, São Paulo, right? So that's the largest. It is about close to $1 trillion, just as a point of reference. There are about 500 companies listed in that market. And Latin America is to somewhat integrated. So depending on where you're opening your bank account in a different country, let's call Chile or Colombia or Argentina, some of those forms and brokerage firms give you easy access to different exchanges. And given that Brazil is the largest one in the region, it's possible for a few investors to access them directly. And also, all of these countries, they have funds dedicated to the region, right? So is a Latin American exposure, is an equity fund for Latin America. So there's an active financial industry in the region, which I should say on some way is even more sophisticated than the US, because given inflation, the local financial system had to become extremely efficient, because you could not settle a wire in 3 days, because by the time the wire was settled, the face value was down like 10%, 15%. So inflation in the late 80s and early 90s made the region extremely efficient from a financial perspective and capital market perspective. And that DNA still runs in the region. And a little bit of these pipes that I just mentioned are in place, giving, of course, the region, there's different countries being close by, the language being very similar, and the access being easier for those investors.
Nice. That's a great upside. So I think we're out of time now. Thank you so much for coming on, Guy. And if people are asking themselves, well, how early is it in this space? Am I too late to the treasury space? Well, I mean, even an advisor has to wear merch from a competitor doing the live show. So we are still very early. I'm teasing you, Guy.
Yeah, no, but I think you're spot on. And this industry, like I'm talking about Bitcoin overall and companies in the space, the sentiment swing. Like again, at some point, volatility doesn't bother you any longer. I have been owing in Bitcoin for many years, working in this industry for almost 4 years. So you just get used to it. But I don't know if you recall, Anders, like not even a year and a half ago, all the miners were dead.
Yeah.
Right? No one would touch the miners, and that industry was done, and they were all horrible investments. And now you're seeing miners at $10 billion per company, and the sentiment is much more positive, and you're seeing good companies perform. And we've seen that many times in this market, and that's what I'm seeing a little bit now. Saylor has done so much for the space, has like opened so many people's eyes about Bitcoin, has innovated in so many ways, and he's gotten a lot of pushback. And I think it's very early, extremely early for Bitcoin. Everyone should have a Bitcoin position, and it's very early for these companies being born now. And I only imagine what these companies in different places will be able to do with a meaningful amount of Bitcoin, a large shareholder base, and a big brand when Bitcoin hits 200, 500, $1 million per coin.
Yeah, it definitely is early, and the opportunity is in front of us. And this industry is so fresh, so new. It literally like started a year ago, where, as you mentioned very early on, he really took some moves and explained the business model. The Q3 earnings call from Strategy last year is the epic, legendary, and that happened in Q4 last year, where
Yeah,
this
that's when he
industry.
approved the 21 plan, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So thank you so much, Guy. I hope that you want to come back here and get anytime there's updates for people interested in this space. Come back and let's talk about what's going on with Orange BTC. It was great to have this chat with you. Thank you for being here.
Great. I appreciate the time. Thank you for a partnership along this journey. We're just getting started and we hope to build a lot in the space and continue to accumulate as many Bitcoin as possible and hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. So I'll hit go. I'm going to take this stream offline now, and then we can chat for 1 minute if you have
Cool.
after here. So thank you everyone for watching. Without you guys, this wouldn't be happening. So thank you for watching, and